Ow!
Greetings YouTube, this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon, and welcome to my reading of the prologue for my recently finished story, The Tribute. Vorin was a spoiled prince of the Fire Mountain tribe, prone to boorish rudeness, eccentricities, and decadence, until an unspeakable act forces his father's hand, and he is exiled to the subterranean Greylands, where once every 200 years, humans are sent as flesh tribute, mates for the mysterious Naga race, upon whom the only other abundant source of water is depended for the endless barren wastes of the surface world. Sentenced for 3 years within that vast, sunless kingdom, and the reluctant husband of Salgani, the blind high princess of the Naga, Vorin must make a choice to retain his childish ways or surrender to maturity, understanding, and love. And now, the prologue of The Tribute. Vorin bounded up the 100 steps of the citadel as if there were only two, barely winded and buoyed with excitement from his news. Laszlo trailed behind, laden with the weight of the 3 thick sand whale skin satchels he was holding. "Come on, slowpoke," the prince called down to him. Laszlo, sweating profusely, paused and gazed upwards, bleary-eyed. "Your Highness," his servant and friend wheezed as he trod foot after leaden foot up the staircase. "I don't think your father will appreciate your lack of decorum." "The old man has too much decorum in his diet," Vorin drawled dismissively, and reached out to hoist Laszlo in the bundles he was holding. "Now come along." Laszlo kept a generous pace behind while he caught his breath. The guard at the entrance door to the throne room saluted and opened the door for the prince. The court assembly made a wide path as he and his servant stepped through. "Father!" Vorin crossed the distance of the dais of the ornately carved throne, made of a solid block of petrified wood from the Fire Mountains. He paused before his father, King Corian, and bowed with an uncharacteristic flourish, hearing Laszlo skid to a halt behind him and fall to his knees, the hard thump of the satchels following as they struck the polished stone floor. "If you please, I've come to announce a great victory." Vorin had expected a reaction, any reaction at all, from his father, the guards, retainers, advisors, or even the assembled courtiers after so grand an announcement, but the throne room was uncharacteristically, eerily silent. The king had not even given him leave to rise. Father? Vorin glanced towards the throne, fighting down the choke of embarrassment with the momentary notion that he had perhaps burst in on some critical discussion. "So that's what became of the heads." The king's rich, sonorous voice pierced the silence like a ram horn at the temple, calling supplicants to devotion. Vorin felt his gaze upon him, those piercing gray eyes that rested beneath dark, bushy eyebrows, and a circlet that held down his luxurious locks of ebony hair, with gold rings fastened to their ends. The prince stole a glance, watching his father slump back, his red Naga silk cloak framing his gold-fringed black leather tunic. "Bring me those bags, boy," he commanded to Laszlo, who was still huffing and puffing from his arduous journey up the stairs, and bowed over as steadily as Vorin. Laszlo obeyed and hauled his satchels up to the throne room's dais to place them at the king's feet, then backed away, facing the throne as protocol dictated. Vorin, still at a loss to understand what was going on, heard the shuffling of the bag's leather straps and the whispering between the king and Avon, his chief advisor, who stood beside the throne. "On your feet," the king said, his voice gruff and terse. "Both of you." Vorin stood upright, his sore back grateful for the reprieve, but his innards churning at the sight of his father's expression, which was as dark and menacing as any look that he was known to give when sentencing criminals. "Tell me, my son, was it you who downed the approaching hovercraft that our tower guard spotted earlier today?" "Yes, father," Vorin said, his voice having lost much of its prepared eagerness. "I was in the west tower and saw them approaching. It was a small hovercraft with 5 guards and 3 passengers bearing the standard of the Plenchus lands. I took my fastest Dromedon and, with surprise on my side, wiped out the entire retinue, guards and all. It was surprisingly easy, didn't even break a sweat. And it was high noon. How our most hated enemy managed to get this far into the deep desert unspotted, I'll never... I invited them. Vorin felt acutely and utterly sick. He also discovered that he had no need to swear. Laszlo had beaten him to it and made a more profane oath than he could have ever devised. The king's declaration stirred a ripple of gasped and alarmed chatter from the assembly. When he spoke again, his voice had lowered an even more threatening octave. You obviously don't remember the name Rogan Hamer, do you? Should I? Vorin found that his voice had become unsteady. A slight crack broke into it, and he swallowed, tasting the faintest hint of bile. The correspondence I'd been speaking about for the last 3 months, the king growled. He slammed his fist upon the throne at the last word, and everyone present, Vorin included, jumped with a start. The correspondence with the man whose very head lies in this satchel? He turned toward his steward at his right and shoved a gloved finger towards the middle bag. Avon, was the wreckage searched? Was the letter aboard? It was in the safe in the captain's quarters in a fireproof strongbox. The gaunt-looking man at the king's side, bearing the same white robes as Laszlo, produced a scrolled parchment with a waxen seal and presented it to the king. Vorin was too far away to see the fine details of the seal, but its distinctive pentagram shape identified it as from House Hamer, the ruling family of the Plentius lands in the far north, where the fertile and temperate valleys of the desert tribe's enemies, fed by the abundant waters of the polar ice caps, lay beyond the impenetrable stone wall mountains. But even then, the prince's sport left a smoke cloud that could be seen for miles. The king took the scroll and broke the seal, glanced over its contents, then squeezed his eyes shut before he looked away. An expression that was midway between pain, shame, and fury crossed his bearded face, and he rested his brow in his hand. He tossed the parchment unceremoniously to the ground, and Vorin watched as it fluttered miserably to the bottom of the dais, the thick wax of the seal making a tapping sound that seemed to echo in the throne room's dead silence. For nearly a minute he said nothing. Your Majesty, the guard said at his left side, concerned. Out! The king's voice was a hoarse whisper, barely audible to all but Vorin. Avon, a puzzled expression on his face, leaned closer to the king. Excuse me? Out! The king sat bolt upright, causing Avon to stagger back, nonplussed. The king made a broad, sweeping gesture to the entire court. Everybody out! Now! Before Vorin could feel even the beginnings of any kind of relief, his father immediately gestured hard and fast towards him. Oh, no, my son, not you. You will remain right here. Your servants may leave and be thankful that I don't have him beaten for being an accessory to this fool's mission, but he'll not want to be here for what I have planned. Vorin's terror grew exponentially as one by one the members of the court and supplicants filed out of the throne room. Gods be with you, was all that Laszlo could mutter before beating a hasty retreat with the rest of the assembly. Soon there were none left but himself and his father. The door latch fell into place as the last courtier made his exit, the sound echoing with the finality of a death knell. 3 months' worth of negotiation. The king's words came hard and cold through a face composed of clenched teeth, narrowed eyes, and skin that glowed a new menacing shade of red. 2 of those 3 months spent just getting the damn royal court and House Hamer to even agree to this peace effort. And you, in the time it takes to void your bowels, made it all for nothing. Father, it's... Vorin's mind floundered for a proper word to use. Unfair to blame me. If I had any inkling that was an emissary... The king fired upwards from his throne to his full imposing height. Vorin's excuse seeming to break what was left of his patience. You have a brain, do you not? He thundered. Why the hell would such a small group come out this far, and bearing their standards no less? He then leaped from his throne and dais and crossed the floor with a speed that nearly blinded the prince with paralyzing fear. Before he could step back, the king whipped his arm out and grabbed him violently by his hair, pulling him closer. Defiantly, Vorin bit back the reflex to cry out from the agony that fired through his follicles. What kind of an idiot did I raise, who would be so eager for glory and honor for his tribe that he'd take all leave of his common sense? His father's long, narrow nose was nearly against his own, which was flat and broad as his mother's had been. Or were you just thirsty for blood? By all the gods, why did they curse me with such a son? It was a mistake! Vorin strained his words through his pain, but there was no mercy to be found in his father's unrelenting grasp. A mistake? His father shrieked the words in naked fury, then, as if fearing murder, appeared to restrain himself. Still, his more level voice resounded with all the scorn of his expression. No, boy, no. Disobeying me by leading that night charge against those bandits? That was a mistake. You knew they were day sleepers, and yet you had us chasing them halfway around the planet. We were lucky the heat got to the survivors before we did. And let's not forget the spectacular embarrassment when you entered the annual Dromedon race, knowing that no one would dare outpace you for fear of execution and embarrassing me in front of the tribal council for it. That, too, was merely a mistake. And of course, let's not forget all the times I had you fetched from brothels when you should have been with me at court. Shall we call those mistakes, too? You'd better thank the gods that the girls are not obligated to tell us when the herbs they eat to make their wombs barren fail to work. Only they know how many bastards you may have sired by them. Perhaps I shall go and ask them, Have the priest legitimize the lineage if I find such a child and place him under your incompetent care so you can make even more mistakes? Vorin, cast in teary-eyed pain, tried to reply, but only managed to force a strange, choking shriek from his throat. Be thankful I am not so cruel, the king continued. Still, have I not warned you time and time again that I would someday make you regret your idiocy? Father, please! Vorin felt trickles of thick fluid running down his forehead that he was certain was not sweat, and his pain pushed him beyond the point where his pride would have prevented him from begging. Forgive me! It won't happen again! Oh, I'm absolutely certain it won't. The king tossed him to the ground with the same careless ease with which he threw down the parchment. His tone was as menacing as his form, shrouded demon-like in his red cloak. What's done is done with the emissaries. At least you were taught well enough to make it look like an accident. The wreckage was too far from the Plenchus lands for anyone to know. Househammer will most likely chalk the disappearance up to some unfortunate mishap. The hovercraft ran into a megarachna, or a pack of sand tigers, or raiders, who knows? He shook his hands as if he had just handled something vile, and Vorin, vision still blurred with tears from his throbbing scalp, saw the red of blood splatters hit the floor. Sand at night, sand at day, the desert swallows up its prey, all neat and tidy. But with you, my very foolish son, I have been more than generous with my warnings. The king stalked over to the long marble table beside the buttressed windows of the throne room's far end, the place where the royal council held their meetings. He then removed a sheet of parchment and pen from the supply at the table's center. Now is the time for the teaching of lessons. He sat down in the chair reserved for his secretary and set pen to paper. Vorin gingerly grasped his head, struggled to his feet, and staggered drunkenly over to the table. He steadied himself against its marble surface just as his father finished writing. Father, what are you doing? He asked as the king rolled up the parchment, dripped a few drops of red wax from the nearby candle onto it, and stamped it with his signet. Ignoring his son's question, he rang the servant bell. A young boy with the same white robes as Avon and Laszlo entered through the nearby door and bowed. The king placed the parchment into his outstretched hands. Take this to the Falcon Heights, he instructed the boy. Inform the falconer to use his fastest bird. It is to be sent to Cisalgnus with all due haste to the hands of the High King. The Grey Lands! Vorin nearly shrieked with a voice that had gained strength along with his limbs. He watched with a new pall of growing fear as the servant disappeared, the pain in his scalp having somewhat subsided with his rising panic. What would you want with the Naga? The time of tribute is in a week, the king said, appearing to be much less angry. a state that only made things seem eerier than before. And this year, as expected, they've invoked the right of flesh. The connection and subsequent realization that he was to be part of the flesh tribute nearly caused Vorin to faint. Staggering, he steadied himself against the table, gasping with new wrenching panic. The flesh tribute? Father, no, please, you can't possibly... Please, you didn't. Oh, I most certainly did. The king glanced Vorin's way with narrowed eyes as he placed the pen and candle back into their holders. I told you that I would one day make you regret your antics. Those were not threats. As king, am I not obligated to make good on my promises? But the Naga? The tribute? Vorin was in near panic now. Father, you may as well have disowned me. By all rights, I should. His father pounded on the table's resonant surface as he stood, and Vorin nearly lost his footing for his fear. Your mother, may the gods rest her soul, would have still been in childbearing age were she still alive today. And I would have, seen your foolishness, made arrangements to sire a second heir with her long ago. And I swore to honor her memory by not looking for another companion. Even now, even though no one would question my wisdom in stripping you of your rights to the throne, I fear that would be too much. Call me sentimental, but I believe that even a damaged vessel can still be useful. And I've made a specific request for your exile not to be permanent. 3 years is enough time, I believe, to teach you a little caution and humility. The Naga to understand due to your position, despite your indiscretions. I know that somewhere beneath that foolish, stubborn body that has more muscle than brains, there hides a true future king of Fire Mountain. Perhaps they can teach you what I cannot. But I'll have to wed a Naga, Vorin pleaded, his hopeless terror railed within him with the indignity of it all. And sire Naga babies with her, by me, by my royal seed. More's the pity for them, the king's reply dripped with pitiless sarcasm. Hopefully those children won't carry your less than endearing traits. Besides, the Naga will think of this as a benefit. They're getting royalty to add to their bloodlines. They will be honored. Father, please, Vorin persisted despite his dismal awareness of the hopelessness of his situation. Don't you even care? That is exactly why I'm doing this. The king's voice softened for the first time. Vorin had arrived with his grisly trophies. But there was no comfort in that softness. I promised you that you would regret your idiocy. Well, my son, your regret has only begun. Get your affairs in order, or lose yourself in the horrors of the brothel like you normally do. I cannot wish. But mark my words, you will be leaving with the caravan to Cisalpinus in a week's time, or you will live the rest of your life with neither home nor tribe. The choice is yours. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this reading of the prologue from the tribute. I will be letting everyone know when and if it is published. If you want to read more, I will, for a week's time after this, have the chapters of the story in their rough draft form on my DeviantArt page, which I will provide a link to down below. Thank you very much for listening once again. If you have any comments or questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Just as always, keep it civil. Thank you again for listening. And as always, this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon. Stay lucky and stay blessed.